Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today and we are going to be discussing a comparison, one that comes up almost any single time I see one of the titles being Borderlands or Destiny brought up in a conversation, and I see it all the time now in my Borderlands 3 videos. Apparently because you shoot and loot in both games, they are the same titles in that Destiny is copying Borderlands, Borderlands is copying Destiny. And these comparisons are very reminiscent of, oddly enough, another Gearbox title, which is Battleborn versus Overwatch, when both those games were releasing in the same month. A lot of people were trying to say that Battleborn was copying Overwatch, and they had similar DNA, and by DNA I mean, oh, they had some heroes in them, but they were, if you sat down and played each of them, completely different games, and it blows my mind that anyone thought these two were similar. Maybe in art style to some extent, but like I said, the biggest comparison you could draw between both of them and many games nowadays is heroes. This is also like saying that Borderlands and Fallout are now competitors because they're both first-person shooters. Just because they have a similar game style does not mean they are directly competing. Now yes, in Destiny you shoot and you loot to an extent because the loot comes at the end of the mission, where in Borderlands any enemy can drop any kind of weapon and it's all based off a algorithm built into the game. And that's where the first difference begins, is the looting itself, the biggest comparison. They're completely different. While Destiny encourages you to finish that mission up and then it spins the wheel on your loot, Borderlands is constant killing, constant picking up, constant recycling of your weapons. Almost every 15 to 30 minutes, you're switching out a weapon at some point in time, where with Destiny, you can really settle down with a weapon for a long while, at least as you get into the later game. And the same could be said to Borderlands in the late game, but most of the time in Borderlands, as you're leveling up constantly, you are always cycling out your weapons, looking for something different, especially when you're taking on different bosses. Different weapons with different elements always help out on top of that, which is something that Destiny actually lacks. And one thing I really see a lot, and I don't take this comparison too seriously considering the fact that I'm assuming it's a younger gamer who never played or heard of Borderlands, but they often think that Borderlands might be copying Destiny, and if we're playing that game, then we all know Borderlands came first. But I also think that this game series differs from Destiny in another area, which is its writing. With Destiny, when you encounter a named enemy, a lot of the times these mini bosses, not the major bosses that you encounter throughout the story through strikes, which do have lore and backstory, but I'm talking about the ones that just end up being bullet sponges, often don't serve a purpose. And you could say the same thing about Borderlands, most certainly, because a lot of times you will encounter a bullet sponge. But once again, if you're targeting weaknesses, using the elements, and on top of that, you know the purpose for this person having a lot of health. It makes sense in universe why this person has health. And often enough, it's a goofy game, so you'll find that the goofiness plays into why this enemy might be a bullet sponge, where, for example, a badass midget will run out of a door, and it's this tiny little guy, but all of a sudden, he has crazy damage dealt and he has crazy health. It's a play on the character itself. And because the universe is so wacky, it breaks the fourth wall constantly, it makes it acceptable in its own form. Whereas Destiny is more of an attempt to be grounded, to be serious, to be grim. And I think that spawns out the fact that Borderlands and Destiny have different focuses on story. Now, Destiny 2 we cannot speak for because it's not out yet, but Destiny 2 is going to try to focus on story more, so it'll be interesting to return to that comparison later on. But right now, speaking of Destiny 1, there was an increased focus on story as more expansions were released, where Borderlands has always had that story focus. At least one had a more serious tone, and then Borderlands 2, like I've said in many videos, had some really surprising plot twists that played off of what has happened in Borderlands 1, the characters you met there, and really continued the story forward in an interesting way, and especially with its ending, left things open for a really interesting plot to carry over into Borderlands 3. And Borderlands, for all its goofiness, surprisingly doesn't have this plot that's kind of underneath everything that's happening. It's under the surface. It's always being directly told to you, so it's definitely interesting. While Destiny, with its main story, it definitely fell flat on its face. Like I said, it improved with future expansions, but I think that Borderlands always had that continued focus on it, which once again differs from Destiny, which really wanted to encourage that teamwork, want you to hop into a strike together with a squadron and take down a big enemy. And the last difference I wanted to cover was the way that classes were set up, where in Destiny you select a class and then you select a subclass and then you customize your armor and your weapons around that. Where in Borderlands, it's more like constantly cycling weapons out, relics, class mods, and then on top of that, there is a skill tree. Then there's the badass rank where you spend tokens and you get little bonuses to your stats, and the skill trees themselves split up, and each character build you can make is completely different. It highly encourages that replayability, where not only the heroes play differently, they specialize in different weapons and whatnot based off how you build your character, but you can build a certain hero in many different ways. It's not just like, for example, in Destiny, where you can make multiple builds, but I certainly think that it is narrow in comparison to a game with as much expanse choice for your character as Borderlands 2, except in Destiny, you're actually able to create your own character, which is definitely awesome. So yes, I wanted to give a fair discussion on this. I know a lot of you guys know I'm not a big fan of Destiny. I didn't want to let my bias get in the way of that. I wanted to make sure that this was fair and give Destiny credit where it's due. But at the end of the day, I think that yes, we can see the similar DNA in these series, but both were created at separate different times. I think that Destiny's audience is not going to hurt Borderlands and vice versa. I think that they're releasing at completely different times, so they should be fine. Even if Destiny 2 has a big expansion next fall when we all think Borderlands 3 is coming, I still think Borderlands 3 will be perfectly fine. But yes, we can see the similar DNA, totally different games. And to cap off this conversation, I just want to say that I'm not preaching on how I think Borderlands is more superior to Destiny and so on. If you're one of the many gamers out there who love Destiny and who think it's better in Borderlands, or don't even compare it but just love Destiny in general, then that's awesome. Good on you. Because here on the channel we like to encourage all types of opinions, and so I'd love to hear yours in the comments down below. Other than that, be sure to follow me on Twitter, like me on Facebook. Those links are in the description down below, along with my Patreon. Do consider supporting that as it fuels all the content we create here. Other than that, stay sexy, stay active. I love you all.